Good evening. My name is Paul Feuerstein. I'm a priest in the Episcopal Diocese of New York and the founder and co-chair of the Task Force Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. I bring greetings from Bishop Hyde, our diocesan bishop, who is a great supporter of our work. And this is a critical issue for us because within our own baptismal covenant in the Episcopal Church, we renounce the powers of this world which separate us from the love of God. And power and control is what domestic violence is all about. This year, I had the good fortune of inviting Sally McNichol, who is a colleague that I've worked with for at least 20 years, to join the task force. Sally has theological education, as I do, and she was the founder of Connect's faith initiatives. And I want to turn the floor over to Sally now, who will introduce the program.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. It's really an honor to be here tonight and a special honor to be here with our really generous, incredible panelists who have agreed to share their experience and expertise with us. It's been my honor to work alongside each one of them for many years, and they've shaped and challenged and expanded my own work in the work to end gender-based violence and all forms of violence. I have a special honor to introduce our moderator for this evening, Darlene S. Torres, and she just brings so much here to us that's really broadens out our understanding of domestic violence and what's going on. She brings over 25 years of deep experience in anti-violence, economic justice, and disability justice work. She's trauma-informed, survivor-centered practitioner, provides individual and group therapy to survivors of all forms of violence. As part of being a restorative justice practitioner and criminal justice reform advocate, Darlene is committed to holistic accountability and transformative approaches to harm. Her work includes supporting people who have caused harm, particularly in the context of intimate partner and sexual violence, while centering healing and community safety. Darlene was a key contributor to the development of Transform, the first 15-week group program in the U.S. specifically designed for non-mandated LGBTQ+ individuals who have caused harm through sexual violence. Guiding Darlene's work is a commitment to recognizing the intersection of identities, including race, gender, sexuality, disability, and class, and how they shape both experiences of harm and pathways to healing. Her work is grounded in a commitment to equity, liberation, and transformative change. Thank you so much, Darlene.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be with our panelists to talk about a very, very serious subject and topic, right? How intimate partner violence is impacting marginalized communities. What are we seeing? How are we supporting survivors? How are we doing this from a holistic, standpoint? And what do we want to do together collectively to support the communities that we're serving and also support each other in doing this work? I would love to now introduce our panelists. We have with us today Aditi Bhattacharya, who is the Director of Client Services at the New York City Anti-Violence Project. Hi, Aditi. We also have Antonia Clemente, who's the founder of the Healing Center. And we also have Zainab, who is the Executive Director of Sati Yetu Center for African Women. Hi. I think we have everyone on the screen. We don't have Antonia yet. So while we wait for Antonia to turn on the screen, I'm excited that we're together tonight. Thank you for sharing your time and your energy and your wisdom and your love, right, for the communities that you serve and that you work with day in and day out, and really offering us, insights to the communities, the needs that the communities have, and how the communities are being impacted, especially in today's climate and what you're seeing. So today we are going to talk about all of that together. And I just want to make sure we have, okay, Antonia, we're waiting for Antonia. So Aditi, why don't we start with you?
Why don't we start with me?
Yes, I'm so excited
It's
to
good
be
to
in
be in
space with
space
you.
with you.
Look
Look
at
at that.
us.
We say the same thing. So for the folks who are in this lovely gathering, Darlene and I go back a long ways. In fact, it's so wonderful to be in space with all of you here. I have known of Paul and Zainab and Antonia and Sally and Arlene, just being in community doing anti-violence work. I've been doing it for about 15 years. Sally trained me when I was a baby social worker. I've been in lots of interagency spaces with Paul, and I have seen Zainab in lots and lots of listserv conversations.
Yes.
I've known Zainab's
Yes.
email address, and this is the first time I've seen her in person, which is so true about the work we do.
It so
And,
is.
yeah, it's just absolutely delightful to be in space. Yeah, in very few words, I came into domestic violence work sort of because I needed a job and I needed to make money. Social work is a second career for me. I used to work in corporate communications and social impact communications in India and then in Canada. And I found myself feeling how plastic that industry was. But it started to make more sense and have more meaning when I started to do work with some fairly well-known nonprofit organizations, both in India as well as in Canada. And then various factors led me to come to this country known as the United States of America. And my visa status at the time forced me to have to go to school because I couldn't work for money. And I decided to take the plunge and I studied social work, for which I'm very, very grateful, because a lot of the skills that I did not have words for around active listening, around being able to contextualize and engage with another individual in relationship, to do relational work, to build people up from a place of stress into a place of calm and mindfulness and presence, very much coalesced with social work. I have a particular love for working in end of life, and I'm also an end of life doula. And I had wanted to do end of life work, but it was very hard to find work in that sector because everybody who does it loves it so much that they never leave. And my PR experience and my social work degree led me to work with a nonprofit, with an anti-violence organization that is now called Womankind, based in New York, that does work with Asian and Pacific Islander survivors. And I found that, much to my surprise, that the life-affirming work of doing end-of-life support, I found the corollary in the life-affirming work of doing anti-violence support, because all we do is affirm people who are living through harm and choose to valiantly and bravely survive impossible odds and still continue to put one foot in front of the other. Just being able to validate them, to be able to attend to their crisis and to help them craft their own path to healing. As you, our bio, you named, Darlene. It's been so life affirming and so everything affirming. I have done work in community-based spaces with people who are at various intersections of marginalized identity. And for the last 7 years and change, I've been with the New York City Anti-Violence Project. For a while, Darlene was my supervisor and my boss, and we worked very closely with each other. And I have taken on the mantle of her near 2 decades of work at AVP when she moved on from AVP to do her own thing. I took on the role of director, and we continue to work very closely in collaboration, Darlene and I. Indeed, Transform, which she designed, now that mantle has been shifted onto me, and I bear it with profound humility and great pride in the work that AVP does. We work with LGBTQ survivors of all kinds of violence, which is unique in the anti-violence sector because most anti-violence organizations work with domestic violence and sexual violence, but we work with all kinds of violence, and we can speak more to that as the time goes on.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you so much for that, for starting us off. Antonia, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Aditi. Hello, everyone. Saludos a todas.
Saludos.
It's an honor, and I'm really glad to be here on this topic that is so, so important and very dear to me. I started a nonprofit organization 25 years ago called the Healing Center. It's a grassroots, community-based organization working with families, women, teens, elder children affected by intimate partner violence. When I first started this organization, I started in my church kitchen because there was a need to address domestic violence in the community. Back in 1999, there was nothing in the community. And I think that at grassroots levels, we need to have a lot more organizations where people can go to because they don't want to take a train. They don't want to go downtown. They want to stay within the community. Excuse me. So I started this organization. We're in the southwest part of Brooklyn. We work primarily with Latina women. And I started working with the women, doing support groups and going into the community, providing workshops on domestic violence 101 to the PTAs, to the local PTAs. And I remember in one of our support groups, one of the mothers said, you know, we've been coming to the Healing Center. What about our daughters? What about our daughters who witnessed domestic violence? And I say, yeah, what about the daughters? You know, so I said, okay, let's talk about this. And we did. So I created what's called the Daughters of the Lotus Project for young girls from the age of 13 through 18 who witnessed domestic violence in the home. Little did we know that as we were doing the work, that there were teenagers, girls in the program who were already in an abusive relationships. So that really opened up another can of worms for us because we said, if these girls are also they're going through domestic violence themselves, what can we do to help the girls? And we did. We provided empowerment. We supported them, counseling, and so on. But we realized that the issue of teen dating violence was bigger than us. I created what is called the New York City Teen Dating Violence Awareness Walkathon back in 2012. And it's been successful where we work with schools and we work with with churches, with CBOs, where young people are coming to these rallies to talk about their violence that they're witnessing. We also started doing elder justice, elder abuse. You know, that's a big issue we don't talk about. And we started sexual assault program called Proyecto Betsaida. I named it after my sister who was deaf and she had been raped. And the suffering that she went through was really a hardship for us. At the age of 15, my sister was raped. I must have been 13. My other sister was 14. And we had to take her to the hospital, to the emergency room. And I remember hearing my sister, who was deaf, screaming in that ER because they were doing a rape kit on her. And that sort of resonated with us, with my family for so many years. So we started this project called Proyecto Betsaida after my sister. What brought me to this work, so I thought it was a calling. I thought that God had called me to do this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and
Mm-hmm.
probably did. But I realized after doing the work at the Healing Center, I kept a secret. And my secret was that I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. I had an uncle who sexually molested me and my sisters from the age of 5 till I was 14. And that experience working with the women and, you know, I had compassion. I had a compassion. I knew that there's hope. I knew that the women that I was going to be working with and was working with had the same stories too. You know, we don't talk about sexual abuse, especially within the Latino community. And that's something that, you know, maybe for another time, for another conversation.
Another panel, right?
Another panel. But that's something we need to talk about.
Absolutely.
You know, sexual abuse within our communities and, you know, in our congregation, in communities of faith, you know, we're not talking about it. And I think that that's important. That's what brought me to this work. And I have to say that after 25 years, I have stepped down as the executive director. It has been a blessing to see the transformation, the healing, the change in people's lives. And it's so important, you know, that we continue this work. It's so important that at the ground level, we continue talking about domestic violence, intimate partner violence. It's not going away. You know, I'll just finish with this, Darlene. The other day, and please don't misunderstand what I'm going to say. The other day, I was at a store and everything was around cancer awareness, breast cancer awareness. I don't see nothing in stores, or I don't see anything around domestic violence. You know, and I think that that's something for us to talk about. How do we move forward? It's not going away. We have normalized it so much that we don't even talk about it. So that's who I am. So thank you so much.
Antonia, thank you so much for sharing and being so vulnerable, you know, right from the start. I appreciate the stories that you shared about yourself and your family. And yes, so many questions. I want this panel to be 5 hours because you're right. There's so much to talk about, right? So let's move over to Zainab. How are you? Introduce yourself to us.
How can I follow those two incredible women? Like they just took it over and I should just sit back and listen to them continue talking. Thank you so much, Darlene. Thank you, Aditi and Antonia. It's an honor to be on a panel with, you know, all of you guys. You know, I'm learning so much and really, really, really in respect. So briefly, just my name is Zainab Yeager, as introduced. I'm the founder and executive director of a small nonprofit in the South Bronx called South Tier 2. South Tier 2 works with, when we started 21 years ago, we started to work with the emerging African immigrant population that was coming up, that not many people knew anything about, and everybody had assumed that only Africans were in Africa, they were not in New York. So that is what, you know, started us. But let me just digress a little bit, you know, how I got into this work. I got into this work by happen chance. And I came to this country to go to college with the idea of going back home. You know, I come from Sudan, and Sudan has over the years seen a lot of different challenges and is continuing to see different challenges. And my idea was come, you know, acquire some degrees and some skills and go back and help, you know, do something back home. But as I was trying to get my degrees here, I was also being exposed to some of the challenges that especially African families were facing, you know, in New York City. One of the first experiences I had was actually a lady who was a hair braider. I used to braid my hair, and I had gone to the salon, and the lady next to me looked, you know, visibly ill, but she, you know, in 3 hours, she collapsed. I took the ambulance almost 45 minutes to get there to come and pick her up and go take her to the hospital. And so after she left, it left a question in my mind And I asked some of the other ladies who were braiding the hair, and I said, you know, when something happens to any of you, where do you go for help? And how do you know where to go? How do you get information? And so the answers left me really disheartened. And then 2 weeks later, I went back to the same salon and I found the young lady and I said, hi, how are you? I was here when you were sick. You know, what did the doctor say? And she told me, well, they just gave me some medicine, but because I don't speak English, I wasn't quite sure, you know, what they told me the problem was. So that was one incident. And so then the second incident was I got a call from a friend that I had done a training for. And they had, she knew someone who had a shelter, and they had an African woman there who was in the shelter, had been there for 3 months without any intake or anything because no one could speak her language. And so they asked me if I could come. And so only lo and behold to find out that she spoke Arabic, she spoke a little bit of French. Had someone actually bothered to ask, what other language do you speak? They would have found that she spoke other languages. You know, so me working with her and then helping her transfer her from all the way in Queens to a shelter in the Bronx where I could be close to her, and then gave me an idea. So I spent 6 months talking to different women and asking them, if we created a space for you guys, would you guys use it? Do you guys feel like you needed a space of your own? So that's the idea that gave birth to South Here Too. And to our work around DV and sexual assault. And over the years, yes, Antonio, you're right. We've served families around, we've served children who have experienced incest. We've had children who've had sexual abuse. These are things that in the community that now is easy to talk about a survivor of DV or, you know, survivor of sexual assault. But child sexual abuse is still a taboo topic that many people don't want to talk about. And, you know, we also have a large community of our clergy that are not responding very well towards, you know, DV or sexual assault. And I'm talking about the pastors in African-specific churches and the imams in our mosques that really turn a blind eye when survivors actually go to them for the, you know, for help. They're the first people survivors often go to, and they don't really do anything and they don't say anything. And sometimes they actually chide survivors and saying, what did you do wrong for your spouse to assault you? Or what, you know, how can you not be a better wife, you know, for your spouse? So we have a lot of work to do. Sometimes I feel like we take 2 steps forward and we take 10 steps backward, especially in the current climate. It just feels like we're sliding backward. Even the little bit of the progress we've made is being eroded by the day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just gonna let that sit for a minute. You've all shared so much already, you know, about what you're seeing in the communities that you serve, you know, what the gaps in services are, and also how the communities how culture plays a part in that, right? How culture plays a part in silencing survivors, in getting, you know, supporting survivors and getting the help that they need, right? And knowing that help is out there, and also getting the services, you know, and how are services adapting to what the survivor needs, right? How are services looking and centering the survivors in their work? And really, like you said, Zainab, you know, if they would have just asked that person, you know, there were 2 other languages that they spoke, right? And so Aditi, I'm going to go back to you, you know, so what are you seeing in the communities that you're serving, the LGBTQ plus communities, that might be different, the same, you know? Tell us.
I've said this in so many spaces, and in the time that I have known AVP and been in AVP and worked within and alongside AVP, I would say, if there were ever a community in this country known as the United States of America that might be considered true survivors of war, it would be the LGBTQ community here. America hasn't seen war in a long time, if ever, right? But everything that both you, Zainab, and Antonia, y'all named, with queer people, with trans people, you know, I listened to what you said so evocatively, Zainab, about the story of the kind of harm that folks experience in spirit, and both Antonia and Zainab, you both spoke about spiritual violence and the fact that places of worship don't ask people the questions. And you would know this well, Darlene, because when you were in AVP, we did a panel on LGBTQ identities and spiritual violence. The reason why AVP does work with LGBTQ survivors of all kinds of violence is because to be queer is excommunication. To be trans is to not exist. So the audacity of not being cisgender, the audacity of not being heterosexual, automatically from such an early time in a person's lived experience, in their lived experience of who they are, and the dissonance that they feel with who they are and how society exists around them, automatically they know that the world is not safe. So from a very early time, LGBTQ people are constantly navigating an environment that may seem on the surface okay, but is profoundly treacherous. And these are people who live, let's say, are born and naturalized here. We haven't spoken about people who aren't, people who are immigrants. And so what's happening, what has been the case for AVP in all of its 45 years of existence, when AVP started, the conversation was around providing support and giving a voice to the survivors, to LGBTQ people who were surviving the AIDS epidemic. And the extreme dehumanization of these people and of their identities and their survivorship and their bodies and their visibility, ways in which they were being maligned. And the history of AVP was, at that point in time, it was sent by virtue of all of the other socioeconomic factors, it was mainly cisgendered white men, gay men. In those years since, now in this here and now, we are seeing an enormous shift in the other direction, and rightfully so. We're seeing a tremendous need for people of color who identify as LGBTQ, for immigrants who come here thinking this place is safe, but they come here and they realize safety is kind of a mirage. Yes, there is pride. Pride is now, commodified. It is now cool. It is now very visible, and all power to the world for actually lifting up the fact of LGBTQ identity. And in the commodification of pride, people are forgetting that pride was fundamentally and still remains a movement against harm. It is still a proclamation of LGBTQ people against the fact that they continue to be violated. You said, Zainab, you take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. 100% for LGBTQ survivors. Dare I say, this is I cannot give you statistics to prove this, but I can give you empirical narrative understanding. And Darlene, you've done this work with and within community for longer than I imagine you would underscore this. There isn't an LGBTQ survivor that hasn't experienced violence. There isn't an LGBTQ individual that hasn't directly or because they know somebody in community experienced pain and suffering for the audacity of their identities. And depending on your melanin count and depending on what kind of spiritual background you have and what kind of English you speak and what kind of documentation status you have, the levels of harm that you experience from other people, your own tribe, your own community, your schools, your churches, your mosques, your temples, the marketplace, the community you live in, the government, every one of these institutions, it's so much gatekeeping, so much harm. And so for LGBTQ people now, it is more than in years. It is a real fact. It's a real matter of life and death, including New York. And you have given stories, Antonia and Zainab. I'll give you a story that happened actually just this morning. We were in an all-staff meeting, and there was a situation where this individual, who is a Spanish-speaking trans femme identified person, was trafficked and was out of state, and had tried for years to find a safe way to get out of the trafficking situation. Started as labor, became sex trafficking, managed to escape the trafficking situation, and was supposed to come into New York, but unbeknownst to her, the people whose home she was supposed to stay in, also people within LGBTQ community, trans and gender non-conforming folks, these people had been living together in a small apartment, and because of an economic harm, because of the lack of safe, occupation, having insecure jobs, and many of them engaging in survival sex, there were problems associated with the way the landlord had provided them this apartment and their ability to pay rent. And a lot of this has been exacerbated through the pandemic in a really major way, because gig economy was completely destroyed in the pandemic. And so a large number of LGBTQ survivors had their only source of income completely gutted. And because they weren't able to pay rent, there were issues, and there was basically a housing court case against these particular tenants. And so this individual now can't make it into this, what was supposed to be her safe home. And she connects with our legal team to find out if there is any shelter that she can stay in for the night. There is no trans affirming bed in the domestic violence shelter industry in the city. So there is no safe place for her to be. We know this in the work in DV. To get a single bed in a DV shelter in the city is like winning the lottery. There is no chance in heck that she's going to get a single bed today. She has no place to stay. The people that were safe for her, she can't stay there. Can she go to a homeless shelter? Probably not, because it's very unsafe for her to be there. I don't know her documentation status, but for her to be in the city as a visibly trans person without actual place safe to be in this current environment is potentially inviting forced arrest. If she is of under documentation status, forced deportation. Doesn't matter that she was trafficked, right? So it's levels of harm and treachery that is very hard to explain precisely how viscerally difficult it is for people to dare to be LGBTQ right now. And so that's the reality of where we're living and what we're contending with at this time.
Thank you, Aditi. I appreciate you really naming the intersection of identities, right? And reminding us that LGBTQ people are not just LGBTQ people. They hold so many other identities, right? And so the level of harm and violence, and the ways in which safety planning has to exist has to really speak to all of those identities, those intersecting identities. So thank you. Antonia, what are you seeing?
So let me start with a story. It's not a story, but an experience. Several months ago, around 5:30 in the morning, I'm hearing some people arguing in front of my house, a little down. So I peeked through the little cubby, through the blinds to see what was going on. And it was a man and a woman arguing. And they had with them a child. It was a boy. He must have been 5 or 6 years old at most. And they're arguing, and they're arguing in Spanish, and I'm able to hear some of the stuff that they're saying. And I'm saying to myself, do I call the police or not call the police? Right? I'm saying, well, it don't look like it's escalating to anything. Maybe I won't call the police. And my reluctance for that is because I know, and we know, that when the police are called in, sometimes the escalation gets even worse, right? So, but they just kept arguing, and my heart I was so concerned for that little child who's witnessing all this, So I said, do I call the police? I felt tension. I felt I was at tension about whether I should call the police, because if I call the police, the police probably would call ICE. ICE would show up. ACS is going to show up. All these governments are going to show up. What's going to happen to these people? And unfortunately, I wound up calling the police because he was dragging her all over the floor, and the police did arrive. By the time the police arrived, they had left. They had left. I'm sure because other people on the block were noticing, and so on and so on. I share this story because the tension that in our Latino community, like in immigrant communities, okay, that people are feeling about ICE coming in to our communities. What does that look like for our communities? What does that look like for the people who are going through all this violence? So that tension for me, I was at tension because I knew calling the police, they may bring ICE and so on and so on. And I'm saying, if I'm feeling that tension from a picky, looking through the window, what are survivors and victims going through at this time during this period with ICE? And we know that there's a great, great fear in our communities of what's going on. The fear that many people are feeling, the uncertainties. People are not going out into the community. The other day I was at the shopping area and it looked empty. It was empty. And I'm saying, why is this so empty? People are afraid to go out. People are afraid that ICE is going to come into the neighborhood. In Southwest Brooklyn, my community is a Latino community. It's an undocumented community. So yes, ICE has been around. Yes, ICE has done some raids. Yes, ICE is using the tactic of fear among people. And it's a reminder of 2019, it's a reminder of during COVID, where families were staying inside because of COVID, where victims and survivors were not reporting the abuse that they were experiencing because of COVID, because of ICE also. During that time, in 2017, 2019, 2020, ICE was coming into the communities, but they were not as aggressive as they are today. And they're using the tactics of fear, of aggressiveness, where people are just afraid to go out. So I'm witnessing, I'm seeing that in my community. And for the people that we serve and work with and know that are people that don't have papers, the fear that they're going through is enormous. It's enormous. So how do we create, I'm glad we're gonna get into that question, how do we create communities that is safe for people to go to? So anyway, that's what I'm seeing now, Darlene.
No, I appreciate that. Definitely. It's interesting because we know that the systems that are set up to protect do not protect the communities that we serve usually, right? Just thinking about, Antonia, you saying, calling the police. Should I call the police? That's always a question when I worked, at the Anti-Violence Project. That was never the number one bullet point on a safety plan because we knew that was not going to be safe for a lot of LGBTQ people, right? Again, intersecting identities, someone who's Black, someone who's brown, who's LGBTQ. What safety is that going to give to them, right? And so even you naming, the current climate, what's happening now with the ICE raids and the fear and the isolation. And when you mentioned the pandemic, I wrote isolation and I wrote COVID because that's exactly what I remember us dealing with. People just it became very quiet, right? We weren't hearing, the hotline was quiet at AVP. Zainab, tell us, what are you seeing as the impacts of the current climate in the communities that you serve?
I think it's the same as Aditi and Antonia are talking about. I think people are just, people are hunkered down in their houses, in their apartments. And you have, people, yes, like Aditi was saying, people sharing for because of economic, challenges and lack of employment or fear of getting employment, people are sharing places that are too small, where, people are not sure about going out and, safety. And so that in itself is a risk factor for all kinds of harm and all kinds of abuse, whether it is, assault between adults, whether it's assault of adults of children, where there is, child, incest, where there's child sexual abuse. So you have all that. And people are also fearful of coming out to ask for help. Because again, there is this connection between, if we go to you, how is our information safe? How are you going to be able to protect us? And I think for many of our communities, this fear of the system is nothing new, because the system has always not been designed to protect our families and our communities. People know that. I think I said it earlier, this whole idea that when you arrived in this country, it is, a place where your rights are protected, where you can be safe. It is, it's a lie. It's this falsehood that are given to, to people. One of my, a mother of a young girl sexual assault survivor, I think 2 months ago, this 13-year-old girl was assaulted by the father's friend. And because, the father's friends come home in the, she calls, all our children call adults in their household, auntie or uncle. So she called uncle. And so, she came back from school and found the guy in the apartment alone. Her parents were not there. And she said he asked her, have you known a man? And she didn't understand what he was talking about. So she then, decided to go get herself something to eat in the kitchen, and he proceeded to, to assault her. And she she ran out of the apartment, hid in the laundry room until the parents came back at 6. We're looking for her. They called the friends, the family friends, they couldn't find her. And then, the neighbor told the mother that she saw her running into the basement. So the mother went and found her there crying, and was lucky enough, took her to Lincoln Hospital, and we were called. But, when we were called, and, the mother's question to the doctor and to me was, I know he's not going to be arrested. I know even if they arrest her, he will come out within 48 hours. How are you going to protect me and my daughter? Now that he has, and the whole family and friends and everybody started then putting pressure on her to drop, to not file case against him. And they're going to destroy his chances of, and he has other families to support. And how can they do this? He made a mistake. And I was like, he committed a crime. He did not only, it wasn't even just touching, he forcibly penetrated her, 13-year-old, right? And so the imam that they go to the mosque with, was saying, we were the one actually putting ideas into her head. I said, there's a medical evidence of what he did. 13-year-old who didn't know what a man looked like is not going to lie of what happened. I said that to say that in our communities, even with the current political climate, it has always been harmful for certain segments. They've been limited or no protection for those that are most vulnerable in our society. And the system that are put in place, a system that were put in place that don't serve our community. They were put in place for different communities. They don't serve and protect our community. The police does not protect our community. I'm sorry to say that. But, to end, I just want to also pose a question. How can we, as allies, support and protect each other? I wanted to ask Aditi, I'm sure you see immigrant, LGBT communities. I know in my community, you can't even talk about it. You know, how can we support the work that you're doing? Because we know our community members are also part of the LGBT community. What do we need to do to learn so that we can be able, we may not be able to protect them, but at least we can be a safety anchor.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Because I believe so much that the way for us to address violence is not to look at it as an individual act against an individual or a crime where there's a perpetrator and a victim, but as a social phenomena that needs to be addressed at different levels, including supporting individuals, holding our society and communities accountable, calling out our leaders who don't speak up and shaming them for keeping quiet, and then creating spaces where there is safety and protection for those who need to get away to take care of themselves.
I really appreciate that question. Darlene, say your piece.
I was just saying yes. I just said yes, but like very low. Thank you.
Louisa, if you're
Please.
still here, I so appreciate that you plugged in all the way from Nigeria, and I wish you a very good night.
Oh, wow.
That we can have you in spaces as an accomplice and an ally across national borders, which are just pure constructs.
Yeah.
To your question, Zainab and Antonia, having, please add to this conversation as well, and Darlene, you as well, please. I would say I hear what you are saying, and it's very easy also as the clinician, I think about how easy it is for us to also sit in the negativity bias of all the things that are not going right, because it's true, there are many things that are not going right. And at the same time, look at us. How many other places will you have a conversation like this, where an organization that works with African diasporic survivors, an organization that works with LGBTQ people, an organization that was set up and does grassroots work with the Latina community, where a person who practices restorative work, who does like holistic accountability and transformative work, how many other places can we all come together and have this kind of conversation? And we have like close to 80 people listening in, right? So to me, I feel like, yes, there are certainly divides within the communities that each of us serves. And those divides, when I hear the stories that you both, Antonia and Zainab, you are saying, I think about how the fabric of human suffering is made of the same threads. The knots are in different places. The colors are a little bit different. The patterns are different. But the fundamental experience of life and suffering is not that different. And so in that, I think while there is a lot that is going wrong, and we are at a very particular crucible time right now, where we are looking into the maws of fascism. But within that, here we are building coalition and community. The fact that I know, and Paul, you mentioned in chat that Barrier-Free Living has done training and has engaged with ABP and other allies, aspiring allies, who do work with trans-identified folks, with LGBTQ survivors of violence, us included. The fact that we're able to have these conversations allows us to bring we change the way we ask questions. We allow spaciousness for people who have identities that maybe the communities that we serve on an everyday basis may not have the capacity, to handle those conversations. But if you and if I can speak to an African survivor of violence, I actually have a client who is from Nigeria. I may speak to them in a specific way because I'm informed by the learnings of being in space with South Yeto in the past, right? And in the same way, you as the executive director of South Yeto, you bring in a certain response to expand the ways in which you can allow LGBTQ people they pick up, they know when there is a safe person. Every survivor of harm, irrespective of what identities they hold, their radar for safety is on point. So if you can model a little bit of safety, that's healing. So us having this conversation, the luxury of having Zoom, the luxury and the privilege of being in a developed nation where we are able to have in a city that has such a plethora of services. Yes, a lot of things go wrong. But this, to me, is a movement in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, let's look at hope.
Yeah.
You know, in the midst of the suffering, you know, let's look at the good that's being done, the survivors that are moving forward. You know, we need to acknowledge that and celebrate with them and make it make it where people are learning their stories. Stories are important.
Yeah.
We need to tell the stories. We need to, you know, for people to tell their own stories. We don't need to tell their stories. You know, we need them to tell their stories, because by them telling their stories, okay, it empowers them.
Yes.
But I think that creating spaces as this, with individuals, support groups, going into the community, lifting it up again, and in terms of what, you know, your organizations are doing, that's important. We can't stay in a cocoon, hidden, and not tell these stories, right? So I think that's really very important, and also have the individuals that you're working with become leaders. Train them to be leaders. You know, train that they become leaders, that they go into the community. See, we think that we're the ones that have to do it. No. We need to, they need to tell their stories. They need to go into the community. People want to hear those stories. And there's a ripple effect to that. Because once an individual tells their story, they'll say, wow, so-and-so shared. I can do that too. And that's a way of healing, of moving forward, of creating transformations in people's lives. You know, so I think we need to celebrate the good that's being done. The survivors, even those that are struggling, know that they have a place that is safe to go to. And celebrate that too.
Thank you for that. Just lifting up what everyone has shared. I have goosebumps. I hope the other folks that are listening feel their spirits being like moved, right? Because that is what it's about. You know, this is a community that we've created tonight, and we cannot do this work alone. And even though we work with specific communities, you know, and you know, underserved communities, if, you know, I'm using like, you know, funder language, right? At the end of the day, it's all about like humanity. Like, how are we really supporting people? How are we, you know, creating space for people's voices to be heard? You know, that we are honoring their journey, you know, and Antonio, as you said, their narrative and their stories, you know, and that we are creating space and supporting them for them to be able to tell their stories to an audience who are willing and able to hear their stories, right? And not kind of like fill in the blank and make a lot of assumptions around their experience, how they identify, you know, none of that, right? It's just being present, you know, to hold their narrative, because we become storytellers. Once we receive these stories, once we receive all the trauma, you know, that people are telling us and sharing with us, it's an honor, and we become storytellers. So what are we doing with that? You know, as the service provider, as the activist, as the advocate, you know, with the power that we have, you know, because of the organization that we are a part of or not. Zainab, please.
And I think as we're doing that, we also need to, I think, start thinking strategically to counter the emerging, you know, for lack of a better word, the patriarchal, you know, neoconservative, you know, narratives that are around, you know, a woman's space is supposed to be in the home, with, you know, the husband as the head of the household. I have nothing against, you know, family structures. What I don't, you know, appreciate is the assumption that it is okay to assault and batter and beat, you know, certain people, that, you know, certain segments of society are less than others. You know, so I think as we you know, advocating against harm and, you know, creating spaces for victims and survivors, we also have to be aware of the narrative that is coming up, you know, and then the use of social media, because you see that. And also some, you know, some of our community members are at the forefront of that. Some men and women are the ones pushing to say, you know, a woman's role is supposed to be here. And if her husband beats her, for example, I mean, among some African communities here, you know, during marriage ceremony, the bride's gifts includes a stick, you know, for her husband to punish her when she misbehaves. So I was like, what are you talking about? Why do you think it is okay for her husband? So when I say those narratives that are now being revived as to show our authenticity, cultural authenticity, we have to begin to, you know, to also think about ways to challenge those and counter them.
I want to add something to that.
Yes, Antonia, please.
Yeah. So in communities, you know, it's so important to partner with other people also.
Yeah.
To partner with faith communities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Having said that, I think our organizations that are here need to provide training to most of these faith communities, because we know that there's damage that has been done also within this roadblocks that has happened within faith communities. But let's not get them off the equation, right? Because these same people that we work with are going to faith communities, are going to their place of worship.
Yeah.
And they need to feel safe. They need to know that, hey, I'm going to this place, to this congregation, to this mosque, to, you know, where I feel safe. But in order for that to happen, I think we need to still open up and create spaces and trainings on a continual basis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Antonia. I think about how the very fact that we have the diversity of the audience that we have over here, and there are questions that are coming up that are in chat as well, that hopefully we'll have a moment to be able to answer. This is one entry point to pique people's curiosity, to call us the way we four have trained each other organizationally over the course of our own work in anti-violence. We're learning from each other, right? Like we're building each other up. We're even, dare I say, no one's perfect. We've also called in our colleagues when have been deltas. I mean, in AVP, we use pros and deltas, not pros and cons, because the delta always signifies the prospect of growth and development and change. So the fact that we've called each other in to the deltas to build each other up as accomplices and allies, we expand that. So the people who are in the audience right now, here you have 4 of us, ready, willing, and able to come in and have conversations with you, to give y'all the skills that you probably, as all empathetic, caring, decent human beings, want to be able to confer. If those of you who are in, you know, spiritual community, you want to be able to confer that to your congregants, to the people you consider your village. So, you know, there is a possibility of change. And Gina, I see what you are naming, and there is, the needle of change is very slow. And I would offer to you, I am not a Christian, but I have seen the ways in which my colleagues, Darlene included, Sally included, Paul included, are people who are pushing that needle to bring change, to create compassion. So the pace of change is slow, but drops, you know, one drop at a time. A tsunami doesn't happen out of the woodwork. A tsunami is made out of little drops. So it's just the fact that we continue to chip away at the edifice of the kinds of institutional oppressions, and conversations are an instrument of chipping away.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah,
Arlene, I want to ask you a question. You're the moderator, but I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
So we've talked about the impact on survivors. And Zainab, you spoke so eloquently about the profound pain of the ways in which social constructs build binaries between people who do the harm and the people who are harmed. And folks like you, Darlene, and I, as well as your colleague and all of that good stuff, but you're the expert. You have been working with people who straddle that binary.
Mm-hmm.
The people who caused the harm didn't come out of nowhere. We, society, built them, right? So how have you, in your experience, seen bridging that binary?
Yeah, I think so. My experience working with people who harm, specifically in the LGBTQ communities, is that they have been harmed as well. That they are also survivors themselves, right? And so the work that I've done with folks, is to say, listen, we are going to hold you accountable, and we're going to do this holistically, because we're going to invite you into this conversation, and we want to know what happened. We want to know what went on and what's going on, not to excuse the violence or the harm that they've done or are continuing to do, right? But for them to be able to have a space to talk about it. Because the same way that domestic violence is taboo to talk about in the communities, right, that we are all a part of, harming people is also taboo to talk about, and so when Aditi and I, we've run these groups together, and we've heard folks say, like, in tears, I've never had a place to talk about this, right, without having to carry the shame, and feeling, so awful about myself, and wanting to understand better, why did I do this, why, but having no one to ask.
Yeah.
And it makes my spirit, shake, to talk about it, because for me, and for, an AVP, I know, because obviously I work there, this is when we talk about prevention, like, this is what we're talking about. When we're talking about community accountability, community care, right? We're talking about this. We're talking about inviting everyone in. And that's not easy to do, of course. It's not easy, right? I'm trained in the SVDV movement, many, many years. And my mentors, taught me, we work with survivors, we work with survivors, we work with survivors. And then those same mentors realized, wait a minute, we're missing people here, right? And how are we actually centering survivors if we're not talking to the people who harm and trying to give them the tools that they need so that they stop harming?
Yeah. You just hit the nail on the head. I think that, yeah, there is a lot of work that is being done, and Aditi, you raised it up. But the other issue I wanted also to add into the mix for us to think about is that those of us who are also doing the work, who supports us and who protects us and who defends us.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially now.
Especially now. Because I think I saw Bethan ask the question, we are now facing a new layer of trauma, which is fear not only survivors, but also allies because of this administration. How do we logistically prepare to get back out there without being harmed ourselves? To tell you the truth, I am fearful. I am fearful. As someone who experienced civil war and who know what it is like to not know if you get up tomorrow, I am scared every day. I no longer feel the sense of security I felt when I first arrived in this country. Because now I know it feels like I could be kicked out any moment and I have nowhere else to go. And so when I say those of us who are doing the work, who is going to protect me? Who is going to, have my back? Who is my ally? I don't think I have that. See?
Thank you, Zainab, for being so vulnerable and for naming that.
And there are many that are asking the same question also. Who protects me? what about me? How do I could walk up the block, right? And something can happen and, you know, ICE can take me away. You know, I think it's very scary. You know, the whole thing with ICE, this administration.
Yeah.
You know, people are being taken.
Yeah.
People are being taken, you know, and I hear you. And on this flip side of that, I am frustrated, very frustrated because of the lack of accountability that exists within this government. There is no accountability. It's like anyone can do whatever the heck they want to do, you know? So that's even scarier, the lack of accountability, you know? So going back, I think creating these spaces is more important than ever.
Yeah.
To have the conversation where you can pick up the phone, say, hey, Antonia, I'm going through this. Something just happened. I don't know who to talk to, you know, and so on and so on. We need to create those kinds of environments, you know?
Absolutely,
But
Antonia.
it's just a very sad time, frustrating time.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's frustrating, agree, scary, sad, you know, it's almost like the Twilight Zone, right? There is a question, and I want to remind folks to put questions in the chat, please. We have until 8:30-ish, 8:28-ish. So I want to capture questions. I'm looking right now at the chat. I do see a question that Beth Ann put in here. Aditi, did you want to say something, or can I read this question?
That question I think was actually from Nancy, if I recall correctly. Beth Ann just copy pasted that. Thank you, Beth Ann.
Awesome.
It's all good. The question that you raised, Zainab, is extremely poignant, and I would offer, I'll give you my own story. When I was at what was then the New York Asian Women's Center, now it's called Womankind, I was in the midst of complete mayhem in my married life. And it was a very particular kind of double standard that I was living, because here I was giving other people best practices and safety planning. I knew everything about the shelter system. I knew which names and what numbers to call. And I wasn't practicing anything that I was preaching for myself.
Yeah.
And things were devolving badly.
Wow.
And I was not functioning very well at work. And I was trying desperately hard to pretend that I had it together, and I didn't, because I was so profoundly ashamed. One of the other participants talked about their sense of shame about what happened to them. And we who do the work figure it out. My supervisor at the time realized something was off. And my supervisor at the time also knew what it meant to ask gently without asking, and to be available in a way that took the bite of my shame away.
Yeah.
And she ended up becoming, I didn't have anybody else to rely on. So when I moved out of the bad situation and I moved into my own tiny apartment and I had a security system, I didn't have anybody to name. If something happens to me, who's going to come for me? You know, I didn't have anybody here. And so I made my supervisor my emergency contact.
Wow.
So yeah, and so to your question, who's going to take care of you? We're here. We are what we have for each other. We rely on each other in this tribe that we create, you know? And there was somebody that was my tribe. I didn't ask them to be, but they figured it out and they showed up for me in a way that was profoundly necessary for me at the time. So we are here for each other. Who else is going to be here for each other?
Yeah.
And I think, Zainab, to add to that, Aditi, thank you. You know, I think it's doing exactly what you just did, right? Just naming what you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and I know that that's easier said than done, right? But I appreciate that you did, Zainab, even though we can't see you anymore. I don't know if that's intentional. And Aditi, you're absolutely right. So just like lifting that up.
Yeah.
No, I was just getting a sip of water. So
It's okay. I was
Yeah.
not shouting you out for that. Take care of yourself. So I do see a question that if folks feel like we can move into that Q&A. You've provided so much amazing information and just narratives and, you know, the vulnerabilities that exist in the communities that you serve and that you yourselves have experienced as well, the harm that you've experienced, right? And what it looks like and sounds like to be able to ask for help and what you need in order to ask for that help. And also the question marks, so many question marks.
Yeah.
And I know that we're not gonna come to all of the answers, you know, in tonight's discussion, but it's really meant to, you know, remind us that we are each other's community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have to find that anchor,
Yeah.
you know, and remember that we are the anchor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I have a question from Andrea. What are the top 3 things for the communities you serve that will improve an immediate need for the community? I can read that again. What are the top 3 things for the communities you serve that will improve an immediate need for the community?
Wow.
I could say the immediate thing that comes to mind, I can't think of 2 more, but the one thing that just like blares into my attention is housing.
Mm-hmm.
Poor people need housing. Poor people need housing. Survivors need housing. Is just not enough out there.
Mm-hmm.
And when people don't have a safe place that they can stay in, and when the shelters don't feel safe, and when the shelters are overrun, and the streets are all you have, and then the streets are not safe because there's people in uniforms crawling around, that's what we need.
Yeah. No.
Access to safe housing.
Yeah.
I can't think of 2 others right now. I'm sure it'll come to me.
No, I absolutely agree. Access to safe housing, because even when, you know, many of our survivors have more than 1 child, and often when they have more than 3 kids, they can't have a space, a shelter. And God forbid you might have among your children a young boy who is the age of 10, that just rules you out of, you know. So when we tell our survivors, it's okay, you can go into safety, where are we sending them?
Mm-hmm.
So housing is a major, especially in New York, housing is a major issue.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Housing and food disparity. Food.
Big time.
Food.
Yes.
You know, I don't want to share all my frustration, right? But I'm tired of people saying, "Oh, these immigrants that come here, they're getting food stamps." People don't know what it takes for individuals to get food stamps. Immigrants are not undocumented people are not getting food stamps.
They're not.
They're not. You
They're
know, and so food disparity is a big major issue, especially for a family of 4 and 5.
Yeah.
You know, so we're looking at housing, at food, and survival. Survival. How am I going to pay this rent? Economic survival.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Economic survival, housing and food. To me, those are the biggest things that are going on.
Yeah. If I may add one thing, when you said, Antonia, you know, economic survival, and Darlene, you've done so much economic justice work. Y'all would all know this so well. Like the intricacy. It's almost impossible to separate domestic violence from economic violence, because more than 90% of people who've experienced domestic violence have experienced profound economic violence. You're not allowed to earn, or if you're earning, your money goes someplace else to the person who's causing you harm, or it's not enough, or you're taking on debt because the person who's causing you harm is depending on you or is holding you hostage for your documentation status, et cetera, and the thing that galls me about, and I'm sure both of you as well, all 3 of you, is the philanthropic institutions in this country, indeed the world, but I can speak for only this country and even more specifically the city, they make you dance, a very specific dance, to get 3 drops of some kind of philanthropy, any kind of monetary grant to a survivor, you have to have receipts to prove that you did not spend it on something that was, God forbid, immoral, that it was spent on cosmetics to make you feel good about yourself, because that is just not as important as food, that the philanthropist decided was more important. Give survivors money, no questions asked. They know what they need it for, let them be.
Right.
Give people the agency to determine for themselves what they will do with the money that we are given by institutions to give to survivors. And do not ask survivors to prove their merit and give you tons and tons of adulation because they got, you know, $1. That dollar is not going to take them very far. So this imbalance in philanthropic institutions and in the general philanthropic industry is extremely, I mean, honestly, it's very classist, it's racist, it's just, it's so many things, but we just need to stop that.
I want to add to that too. For many organizations that receive funding, the thread now of losing funding, especially federal funding, if you are serving victims who are undocumented, who are LGBTQ people, who are DEI, all those clauses have been eliminated from federal grants.
Not only that, you also have to sign an attestation, which then also makes you in a legal bind, because then they can come back and say, you signed this attestation saying you're not doing DEI, LGBT, And now, if we look through your work, we can find this and this and that, therefore you are non-compliant, therefore. So it's one thing that goes after another. And going back to what Antonio was saying, where people say, oh, immigrant and undocumented are getting food stamp or whatever. Those are people who have never seen a family that is hungry, a child that is hungry. Undocumented immigrants contribute so much in taxes to this country that they don't even get returned back.
That's right.
You know, we talked about housing, we talked about, you know, economic survival, but we didn't talk about what it means to always to be alert, you know, that mental power that it takes every day to try to be able to survive every day.
Yeah.
It is an emotional turmoil.
That's right.
We have not even talked about that, you know, and the mental health crises that, you know, people go through, right? I mean, it's just amazing when some of our survivors tell me when they go into some of these public, you know, city agencies to get, you know, services, it's the level of abuse and disrespect that they face. That is unbelievable. And sometimes it's from the same people who look like them.
Right. Yeah. I think that, you know, Zainab, to your point, you're right. You know, we didn't talk about the impact on the mental health, right, of the survivors, you know, and how it's not normal to live in the state of hypervigilance.
Exactly.
It's not sustainable,
No, it's
you know, and there's so many impacts, you know, physically, mentally, spiritually, you know, and I look forward to the next panel that we're on together to talk about that, because that deserves, you know, the time to be able to really just invite in.
To delve in.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have another question that it's along what you were all talking about as far as this administration and kind of like the safety. We are now facing a new layer of trauma, which is fear, not only survivors, but also allies because of this administration. How do we logistically prepare to get back out there without being harmed ourselves?
We had a conversation about this today. And so some things that came out of our motley crew of queer people was choose your safety.
Yeah.
There are many ways to be part of the movement. And if we are better off not being down there picketing and protesting because we can serve on the back end quietly from whatever is the relatively safer environment in these unsafe times, let's do that. To those who are choosing to protest, make sure that you have safe people that know your whereabouts. Make sure that your wishes are known. If you have the privilege and capacity to do so, know an attorney. And make sure that their contact information is somewhere on your person that cannot easily be removed.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are keeping as much of the important pieces of conversation in spaces that can be surveilled as little as possible. Protect your privacy. And for folks, I mean, in our agency, we talked about it's kind of like lockdown the second. What does working remote realistically look like? How are we going to create infrastructures in our organization? And this applies to this is not just nonprofit, any team, anybody. Figure out in your organizations, in your teams, what kinds of communication models y'all are going to use to sift through the gossip and the fear mongering, and to also understand what actually is going on the ground, not only in terms of danger, but what is the cool stuff that people are doing. Because that mutual aid is going to come in major handy at times like this. It's that actually works. That's what's working in Chicago. That's what's working in LA. That's what's going to work over here as well. So figure out the good people, keep your eyes peeled and your ears peeled for things that are going on that are helpful, and tap into those people and protect your privacy at all costs.
Thank you, Aditi. We have a couple of more minutes before our closing comes. So please, Antonia, Zainab, share your gems.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat about working in faith communities. I think that keeps popping up. And I think that is, the faith community can be a resource. It could be a roadblock, it could be a resource. But I think that we need to continue working with faith communities in terms of providing training for clergy and lay people, because that's essential. At the end of the day, many individuals, will say, oh my God, why is this happening to me? God, where are you? Why is this happening? There's a source of spirituality that goes from the in out. So I think it's important. I've done a lot of faith work in Brooklyn. And I think it's really important. You have faith communities that are receptive, that will take the training, and you have some that won't. And that's okay. We work with those who want to hear and want to create the change and transformation that needs to happen. So I think that I just want to advocate for the next panel, that we include working in faith communities, because that is essential.
Not only just faith communities, but I think intra-faith dialogue is important. Having the different faith, traditions coming together and sharing, what their faith traditions say about, violence in the home, harm doing, and so that they can also learn from each other. They can also build. So you build that synergy across, other than just it being isolated, faith traditions, where and then, one church says another, and then the mosque says another, and then everybody says, we don't know what we're talking about.
Right. They're all going to say from their own theological teachings, So, but I think it's important that we continue that conversation with faith communities, because I worked, I was part of the Brooklyn DA. We got a grant for the Brooklyn DA to do faith-based work in Brooklyn South.
Yeah.
And I remember we did a training. Sally was there with me.
Yeah.
And we did a training for clergy people around orders of protections.
Yeah.
That was so controversial for many clergy people, right? Who stays, who goes, who stays, who goes, never ever thinking the safety of the individual.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and that's still the conversation that goes on. So I think.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I'm glad that you added that, both of you, for sure. So I'm gonna move us to our closing. I mean, this was so rich and so incredible. I'm hearing that we're still out there. You're still doing the thing. It's not gonna stop. And we're recognizing the need to really just continue to incorporate each other in the work, right? And keep the dialogue going, and also taking care of each other too, You know, we take such good care of the survivors and the communities that we serve. And this is a reminder to me too, how can we also care for each other and do this work safely, you know, and sustainably as well. I appreciate all of your time and the gems that you shared with us, you know, and it was just so beautiful and wonderful to be in space with all of you again in this way. Sally, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, I just want to thank you all. I mean, so powerful. And the way that the place that you've come to here at the end about caring for one another, supporting one another, the web of interconnection that is already there. And let me just invite everybody that's watching us now to be part of that. We can all listen, we can all hear, and we can all hold people's stories. We can all have just embracing non-judgmental seeing of the reality of what is going on right now. And we can bear witness and be in solidarity. And for those of us who have more safety, more privilege, we got to step up. We need to make some sacrifices that we have not made, and some of why we're in this place right now from our lineages and our histories. And so that needs to be very clear and solid. And I hope we can do this again soon. I mean, it's just been so powerful. It's such a great honor and respect and love for all of you.
Likewise.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Amen.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Darlene.
Thank you, Zainab.
Thank
you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
This was great. It raised a lot of questions. For
It
sure.
did.
I mean,
Yes,
it's like
everyone that joined, it was so incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you know, thank you so much for it. It's been an honor to be a part of this, you know. Yeah, it's been an honor. Yeah.
It has been a powerful experience to hear all of your stories.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway.
All right.
Our stories will
Blessings
continue.
to all.
Yeah, and Paul,
Take care of yourselves.
Take care of yourselves.
Have a
Definitely.
wonderful,
Do some good
weekend.
aftercare,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.